Today, Bitcoin slips to $107,000. Vice President JD Vance delivers the keynote speech at Bitcoin 2025. And we speak to Congressman Bryan Steil from the floor of the convention hall. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Mackenzie Segalos, on the ground in Las Vegas for day 2 of Bitcoin 2025. Now, lots to talk about here, but first let's take a quick look at markets. Cryptocurrencies pulling back as Wall Street also turns lower this morning. By noon Eastern, Bitcoin fell back to the $107,000 level. Ether managed to hold on to the $2,600 level, while XRP dropped to $225. Okay, let's get to the latest here at Bitcoin 2025. It's the first day of general admission, and Vice President JD Vance just took to the main stage this morning to deliver the keynote address. His remarks come less than a year after President Trump's keynote speech to Bitcoiners in Nashville, cementing the Bitcoin conference's political influence. Crypto World's Talia Kaplan has the latest on excitement from attendees and what the Vice President had to say about the Trump administration's crypto agenda.
With Bitcoin hitting new records, advancements for crypto legislation in Washington, D.C., and a more crypto-friendly administration, it's no surprise that this crypto conference is quite popular this year. Organizers here tell me there are more than 35,000 people attending this event taking place in Las Vegas this year. That's compared to 25,000 people who attended the conference last year when it was held in Nashville, Tennessee, and when Donald Trump, who was the then Republican nominee for the 2024 presidential election, headlined the event.
This place is buzzing.
David Bailey is the CEO of BTC Inc., the company hosting this Bitcoin conference. He says this year's attendance is breaking records.
People are very excited to be in Vegas. This is the first time we've ever done the show here, but I think number one is the price of Bitcoin's at all-time highs, and I think people are ecstatic about where the market's going next. We're at the beginning of something that I think is going to be transformational for the global economy, and the epicenter of this entire movement is right now in Vegas for this week.
Crypto's had some major developments in the run-up to the conference. Just last week, Bitcoin hit an all-time high near $112,000, driven in part by institutional ownership and corporate adoption, as well as easing trade tensions between the U.S. and China. Also last week, the Senate advanced the Genius Act stablecoin bill on a bipartisan vote. Under the leadership of President Trump and with Paul Atkins at the helm of the SEC, the agency has been moving towards a more lenient stance, dropping enforcement actions against crypto firms, including Coinbase. Now, this is the 5th Bitcoin conference for Matthew Siegel, head of digital assets research at Van Eck. He explains what he thinks makes this one different. How does this year compare to the other conferences in the past?
Bitcoin is becoming a mainstream asset, and the difference this year is the participation from listed corporates, so MicroStrategy and its copycats, who are really the equity capital markets right now are wide open for crypto strategies, and that's been the hottest part of the market. And then the second category is government.
Why do you think there's a record number of people in attendance at this Bitcoin conference this year?
Las Vegas might have a little bit to do with that,
I think so.
but I think it's the Trump administration. Various media outlets are carrying more information about crypto. There's just a buzz around it.
What do you think is different this year compared to other years?
I mean, it's the location. The conference seems a lot bigger, and there's a lot more companies that are growing and a lot more products this year. But also, it's the Vegas atmosphere. So instead of having one little, one big after party, the whole thing is an after party every night.
What made you want to attend this Bitcoin conference this year?
I knew that had I not, the FOMO today would have been unbearable.
Bitcoin is at all-time highs right now. We're at 110,000. I remember the days people thought it would never go to 100,000. So I mean, you break triple digits in the, in the thousands, 100,000. Like, I think that's going to get more people no matter where it is.
President Trump is now our president. We're talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Bitcoin's at an all-time high, and so a lot of institutionals are thinking about adopting it. I think it's just going to be a really big thing going forward.
What are you most looking forward to here at this event this year?
Just meeting other people who both understand Bitcoin and are excited to see where it continues to go. I think that it's getting more and more people are learning more about it. It's becoming more and more mainstream, and I think ultimately it's a good thing for people to find utility in Bitcoin as a savings vehicle when inflation's as crazy as it is.
What can people expect this year here at Bitcoin 2025?
Well, they can expect the biggest party and celebration on the planet. They can expect some major announcements to happen. They can expect some of the leading political figures and Wall Street figures, Bitcoin leaders to be speaking.
As Bailey noted, Bitcoin 2025 is bringing together several U.S. lawmakers, top executives from crypto-focused firms, as well as White House officials, including AI and crypto czar David Sachs, as well as Digital Assets Council Director Bo Hines.
If we want to be the crypto capital of the world, we need to send a delegation to be here on the ground. I mean, this is the premier event of the year as it relates to Bitcoin. There's a lot of exciting innovators that are here, and look, we're working to welcome in the golden age for digital assets, as the president likes to say. I think that just being on the ground at this conference, meeting with folks that are building in the United States is extremely important. We want to welcome folks that have gone offshore back home. Our message to these people is welcome home to the United States, the best capital markets in the world. We want to make sure that innovation is happening on our shores.
This year's keynote speaker, Vice President JD Vance, who addressed attendees at the conference this morning. Vance doubled down on the president's goal of making America the crypto capital of the world.
As you know, there's a new sheriff in town because after 4 years of mistreatment and outright hostility led by Democrat regulators, lawmakers in this country have a choice. Will we lead our nation into a future of financial sovereignty, of innovation, and of prosperity, or will we let unelected bureaucrats and foreign competitors write the rules for us? And I'm here today to say loud and clear, with President Trump, crypto finally has a champion and an ally in the White House.
The vice president outlined some of the actions from the White House related to President Trump's pro-crypto agenda. One of Trump's first acts in his first week as president was an executive order. That order aimed to promote U.S. leadership in digital assets and created a working group tasked with proposing new crypto regulations. Then in March, President Trump signed another executive order creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The order also established a U.S. digital asset stockpile managed by the Treasury Department.
I've talked to so many of you over the last couple of days, and the consistent fear that I hear with all the great things that have happened over the last couple of months, the consistent fear that I hear is that there's still this perception that digital assets are not welcome in the mainstream economy. And let me promise you that our effort to change the policy is purely about changing that. We want our fellow Americans to know that crypto and digital assets, and particularly Bitcoin, are part of the mainstream economy and are here to stay.
Right now, no word if this Bitcoin conference will be back here in Las Vegas next year. Bailey tells me he likes to keep that as a surprise. Make sure you keep it here with CNBC Crypto World for those major announcements he referenced and for more conversations with lawmakers as well as big names in the industry.
Now, as Talia just mentioned there, lawmakers are making their presence known here in Vegas. I sat down with one of them yesterday, Wisconsin Congressman Bryan Steil. The Republican legislator is chairman of the House Subcommittee on Digital Assets. So I asked him what crypto regulations he and his fellow lawmakers want to prioritize. So we're at a Bitcoin conference, but every conversation comes back to stablecoin legislation. And that's so much of what you've been working on Capitol Hill. Talk to me about where we are.
I think there's real excitement across the board of two major pieces of legislation, both stablecoin and market structure. They're really needed together to unlock the golden age of digital assets. Stablecoin is moving forward quickly. Senator Hagerty has the Genius bill in the Senate. I have the Stable Act in the House. At the end of the day, those will marry up and really unlock stablecoin. At the same time, we're moving forward with market structure legislation. And so as that bill is going to be introduced in the House in the very near future, we will be in a position to truly couple those bills together. And I think they're both essential as we think about how we're going to unlock the broader digital asset space in the United States.
Certainly a lot of support from the White House. You have David Sachs saying that if the Genius Act is passed into law, he expects trillions of dollars of demand for U.S. treasuries virtually overnight. Do you think that estimate is accurate?
I think unquestionably a lot is going to come in. We'll determine the amount. But I think it's essential to pass Stable Act legislation to really maintain dollar dominance. I think there's two key things. It enshrines the United States dollar in our dominant role as the world's reserve currency, but also stablecoin issuers will be purchasing U.S. treasuries at a period of time where that is incredibly essential. And so from a policy perspective, the United States will win if we get stablecoin legislation in place, and we're on the cusp of being able to do that.
I spoke to the Tether CEO about an hour ago, and they were, the seventh biggest buyer of corporate of U.S. debt last year. So it is pretty incredible to see those stablecoin issuers rise up the ranks. One of the questions that's come up is whether there are enough safeguards in this legislation to prevent against potential conflicts of interest. Do you feel like there are sufficient guardrails as the legislation currently reads?
We're currently in an era with no regulation, and so this bill brings forward new and substantive regulation, in particular in the consumer protection side. So I think there's a huge opportunity here to make sure that we're actually putting in place a regulatory framework that protects consumers and enhances U.S. dollar dominance and allows U.S.-based U.S. domiciled companies to outcompete the rest of the globe. And so there's always going to be fear-mongering. There's always going to be people concerned that something isn't perfect. But I think the legislation in front of us is a absolutely essential piece to unlock digital assets, and in particular stablecoins in this case.
It has been somewhat polarizing in the last few weeks. You had Maxine Waters walk out of your subcommittee. How was that day?
Well, on the whole, actually, a lot of Democrats stayed at that subcommittee meeting. Yes, Maxine Waters and I believe 5 other Democrats chose to walk out and put their heads in the sand rather than engaging. But a number of my Democratic colleagues did stay and engaged in dialogue about what we need to do to move forward really, really important market structure legislation. The last thing that we should be doing is put our heads in the sand in failing to legislate. What happens if we fail to act is that we will see regulators move forward through enforcement action. Enforcement action is a terrible way to legislate. Instead, we need engagement from everyone on both sides of the aisle. So I was disappointed when Maxine Waters chose to walk out of the room that day, but I was encouraged that a number of Democrats stayed behind, engaged in the necessary and substantive policy conversations that are going to be needed to get this legislation from where it is today all the way across the line and signed into law.
Are you at all concerned about some of the pushback that's recently come up with Senate Democrats with respect to wanting to add an amendment that would prevent sitting presidents and other senior officials from being able to either directly or indirectly profit from stablecoin-related ventures? It seems to be a very clear shot at World Liberty Financial.
Anytime you have legislation that looks like it's going to go across the line, there's going to be a whole host of non-germane amendments and ideas that are going to want to hitch a ride to the bill. If the Senate wants to have a conversation on how we should regulate the art market after Hunter Biden was drawing art and selling it for big dollars across the globe, that could be a conversation that could be had. We need, though, to make sure that we get this legislation correct. Non-germane amendments aren't going to help us do that. Regulating in this space will help consumers and will help the United States of America.
Okay, so stablecoin legislation seems to be the big first test of getting crypto policy passed into law in the U.S. Then you mentioned crypto market infrastructure bill. Is it realistic to potentially see both? Like, help me level set expectations here.
I think you need both of them, and the president has called for both. So at the crypto summit at the White House that I was at, the president made clear he wants both of these pieces of legislation to his desk before August. I think we're on a timeline to do that, and I'm committed to delivering on that request. Market structure is coming online. We're going to be introducing more substantive legislation along with my colleagues in the House, in particular G.T. Thompson in French Hill, who are leading the way in this regard. Coupling that with stablecoin really unlocks this. Some people would say it's two sides of the same coin. I say it's peanut butter and jelly. You need both of them to really ultimately move the United States forward in a substantive and transformational way. I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to get there in the timeline that's been set forward.
Now we're here at Bitcoin 2025, which is the biggest event of the year for the cryptocurrency. What do people want to see from you with respect to Bitcoin-specific policies? Is it a commitment to develop or roll out a Bitcoin acquisition strategy around this Bitcoin reserve? Is it something else altogether?
I think the number one thing people want is certainty of the regulatory framework, and that is our market structure legislation. That then allows the private sector and capital markets to determine the best use and how to move forward and innovate in development. It should not be policymakers who should be picking the winners and losers. It should be the free market and capital deployment to make those determinations. If we do this right, we'll put legislation forward that will have key consumer protections, unleash capital innovation and development in the United States, and the market will determine the winners and the losers. What I hear time and again is market certainty, market clarity, and that's what I think we have the opportunity to move forward on in the House.
Would you support the U.S. government buying Bitcoin to add to the reserve?
What we saw the president come forward with was looking and saying the strategic approach of the United States over the past number of years as it relates to digital assets is completely lacking. The United States actually has a reasonably large reserve today of digital assets. We don't have a very clear inventory of what those assets are and where they're located. We also don't have a strategic approach as to how those were previously being sold. So they were being sold ad hoc rather than having a strategic approach. The president is a business person that comes in and recognizes having no plan always loses to having a plan. We have a big opportunity to really build to move forward in the realm of digital assets that are currently held by the federal government.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today, but we'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.